Welcome to another episode of Sierra Stories. Are you ready for brothels, booze, and ghosts? Okay, let's go. When people talk about Truckee's early history, the focus is usually on familiar stories. The railroad pushing through the Sierra, the harsh winters, the men who worked dangerous jobs to build a town in a place that was never meant to be easy. These stories matter, and they explain why Truckee exists at all, but they don't fully explain what daily life here looked like in the late 1800s, especially after the workday ended. Like many railroad towns in the American West, Truckee developed quickly and unevenly. Thousands of people passed through, many of them single men with irregular pay, physically demanding work, and little reason to settle permanently. They worked hard, spent money freely when they could, and looked for distraction once the saloons filled and the main street quieted. Where that kind of population existed, certain businesses followed. Saloons, gambling halls, and places that offered companionship became part of the town's economy, whether they were openly acknowledged or not. In Truckee, much of that activity was concentrated just behind the main business district, on a short, narrow street that ran out of the view of polite society. It wasn't meant to be attractive or permanent. It was practical, close enough to serve its purpose, and easy to ignore when convenient. That street was Jibboom Street. For decades, Jibboom Street functioned as Truckee's red light district. Brothels, saloons, dance halls, and opium dens operated there in a kind of uneasy balance with the rest of the town. Everyone knew what happened on Jibboom Street, even if few people spoke about it openly. Respectable businesses faced the main street, while their back doors often opened directly onto Jibboom. The women who lived and worked on Jibboom Street were rarely written about as individuals. When they appear in the historical record at all, it's usually in census listings, police blotters, or newspaper reports about arrests and disturbances. Their names survive almost by accident, preserved in documents that were never meant to tell their stories. Records from the 1870 federal census list women such as Nellie Colley, Maggie Smith, Pauline Johnson, and Belle Whitney as prostitutes living in the district. Nearby, more than 20 Chinese women were also recorded, most likely trafficked and living under coercive conditions. Beyond their names and occupations, little else is known about them. These women were a constant presence in Truckee, even as the town tried to distance itself from them. They provided services the town relied on, yet they were blamed for the disorder and violence associated with the district. Over time, Jibboom Street developed a reputation for noise and trouble. Fights were common. Alcohol flowed freely. Complaints from nearby residents appeared regularly in local newspapers. Law enforcement patrolled the area, responding to disturbances but rarely addressing the underlying conditions that created them. Eventually, a small stone jail was built near Jibboom Street, close enough to deal quickly with arrests. It wasn't intended to change the life on the street. It was intended to contain it. Most of the women who lived and worked on Jibboom Street appear briefly in the historical record and then disappear. One woman, however, appears repeatedly, not because she was respected or influential, but because her life intersected with the legal system, often enough to leave a trail behind. Her name was Mollie Forshay. Mollie Forshay was Irish-born and arrived in Truckee around 1869 when the town was still young and growing rapidly. Like many women who came west, the reasons for her arrival aren't recorded. What we know about her comes almost entirely from court records and newspaper reports. Mollie worked as a prostitute on Jibboom Street and quickly became well known to local authorities. She was arrested multiple times for disorderly conduct, public intoxication, fighting, and theft. Newspaper accounts from the period describe her as loud, combative, and frequently involved in altercations with both other women and men. Several reports describe violent incidents that spilled out of Jibboom Street and into the main part of town. In one case, Mollie was said to have chased someone through Truckee with a whiskey bottle. These articles were written to entertain readers and reinforce moral boundaries, not to explain Mollie's circumstances or the reality of her daily life. As her arrests accumulated, fines became less effective. Theft charges led to jail time rather than citations. By this point, Mollie was well known to law enforcement, and patience for repeat offenders had worn thin. At some point in the early 1870s, Mollie left Truckee and crossed into Nevada. The reasons for her departure aren't fully documented, but her pattern of conflict followed her. While in Nevada, Mollie became involved in a violent altercation with a man named Tom Kelley. During the confrontation, Mollie stabbed Kelley, killing him. Contemporary accounts indicate the stabbing occurred during a dispute, though details vary depending on the source. Mollie was arrested and charged with homicide. Unlike her earlier arrests for disorderly conduct and theft, this crime carried serious consequences. She was convicted and imprisoned in Nevada, marking a turning point in her life. Forshay had been sentenced in 1872 and was the only woman in the Nevada State Prison. She was housed separately and did a lot of sewing work. About 2 years into her sentence, newspapers reported she had twins, and the story detonated into a public scandal involving the warden, Colonel P.C. Hyman. A petition circulated to get her released. In September 1875, she was pardoned and released after roughly 3.5 years. One colorful detail, repeated in the Tahoe Guide account, is that she left the prison gate escorted in a horse-drawn carriage. A later memoir claims the pardon was to quiet the scandal around the warden. Treat that as a possible motive rather than proven fact. What we don't have from these sources is a clear document-backed account of what happened to the twins immediately after birth or where they were raised. The sources confirm the twins existed. They don't reliably trace their later lives, though. After her release, women in Carson City reportedly set her up with a dressmaking shop. That experience lasted about 6 weeks before she decided it wasn't for her. By December 1875, she headed to Winnemucca, planning to open a brothel. Period reporting keeps tabs on her, including imprisonment in Elko for selling alcohol to Native Americans and also malicious mischief in Reno. By summer 1876, she's described as back in Truckee as a kind of reigning troublemaker on and around Jibboom Street, with arrests and accusations that often went nowhere. The Tahoe Guide article notes arrests and complaints in Truckee, and that the Truckee Republican regularly mentioned her in fights and disturbances. On November 3rd, 1877, in Reno, a dramatic gunfight erupts in a hurdy-gurdy house involving William Phillips, a young man said to have followed her from Truckee, and Wes Holliday. Holliday is shot and dies the next day. The account is explicit that Forshay was the center of the jealousy taunting that set it all off. By 1878, she's reported living in Tuscarora, a booming silver town in Elko County, and continues getting into trouble. A striking 1879 incident reported in the same piece, a bedroom curtain fire that woke her. She tore down the burning fabric and suffered serious burns to her neck, chest, and arms, though the surgeon reportedly did not consider them fatal. Contrary to some simplified retellings, Mollie does not disappear immediately after the fire. Her name continues to surface sporadically in Nevada legal and newspaper records. These appearances suggest continued instability, likely poverty, and ongoing entanglement with petty crime and local courts. But at this point, she is no longer a celebrity figure, just a familiar troublemaker moving between towns. In 1888, Mollie Forshay is convicted of larceny. This is the last reliable cited legal event connected to her name. The conviction confirms she was still alive nearly a decade after the fire. She remained within Nevada's legal system, and her life trajectory had not meaningfully stabilized. Tragically, over a lifetime pained by a world of abuse, suicide, drugs, murder, and alcohol, Forshay spiraled downward into poverty in her final years, freed only by the respite of death in 1900 at the young age of 53. Most of the other women who lived and worked on Jibboom Street were not even afforded that level of documentation. Their names appear once, if at all, and then vanish completely. Jibboom Street itself outlasted them all. The brothels closed, the noise faded, the town changed. Today the street looks ordinary, easy to walk past without realizing how central it was to Truckee's social life. This history isn't about scandal or spectacle. It's about understanding how frontier towns functioned and whose lives were considered acceptable to forget. Jibboom Street existed because the town needed it, even as it denied responsibility for the people who lived and worked there. Remembering Mollie Forshay and the women of Jibboom Street doesn't mean romanticizing what their life was like. It simply means acknowledging that they were part of Truckee's history, whether the town wanted to remember them or not. Jibboom Street doesn't announce its past. There are no markers that explain what once happened here, and very little physical evidence remain despite all the buildings that are still there. What survives are fragments, names, and census lists, court cases, and stories passed down through time. Mollie Forshay's life reminds us how easily people can disappear from history, even when they were once well-known in their timeline. Her story ends in records, not memory, and for many years that seemed to be enough. I want to stay on Jibboom Street a little longer and share my ghostly encounter I had one night. A couple years ago, after dinner in downtown Truckee, I was walking down Jibboom Street on a crisp fall night, heading back to my car. It was in that in-between time of day, no longer light, not quite dark, when shadows stretched and the street grows quiet. As I walked, I saw movement. A dark figure ran across the street in front of me and disappeared between two parked cars. It moved quickly and deliberately, like someone trying to get out of sight. It wasn't a reflection or a drifting shadow. It looked like a person. When I reached the spot where the figure had gone, there was no one there. No sound, no footsteps, nothing between the cars. The street was empty. For a long time after that, I tried to talk myself out of it. I told myself it had to be my imagination or the light playing tricks on me. But the memory never faded, and neither did the certainty. I know I saw a figure. It was small, too small to be an adult, maybe a child, maybe a Chinese worker who lived nearby. On a street like Jibboom, where so many people pass through and were quickly forgotten, it's impossible not to wonder. History leaves marks in different ways. Some are written down in courts and census lists. Others linger quietly long after the story stopped being told. I don't know who or what I saw that night, but I know it was there. Okay, this is my Sierra story for today. If you want to learn more about the history of the Sierra, stay tuned for my next episode where I talk about Snowshoe Thompson, one of the most legendary mail carriers in American history. If you like stories like this, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.